Okay, I just started this and people are coming on. Welcome everyone. I'm Theodora Scarata with Environmental Health Trust, and I'm here today with Eileen O'Connor, and she is the Director and Trustee of Radiation Research Trust and has been working on this issue for 18 years. So I thought I would start with just hearing about how you got involved in this issue. I understand that you developed breast cancer when you were 38 and you lived near cell antennas. And
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah. Oh, well, hello everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all. I'll go back to the 18 years ago when I was 38. Makes me feel old, but thank God I'm still here anyway. At that age, we just moved into the countryside, and we bought a beautiful home. And at the time we were about to move in, a big, as you call them, cell tower was put up just 100 meters from my home. And I didn't really have a clue what it was, but I just was more worried about the fact that it looked unsightly, and raised a few questions about it. And I was told at the time there's nothing to worry about. And so I just forgot about it and got on with my life, and busy bringing up 2 young children at the time. And I was running a successful photographic business with now my ex-husband. And we were very busy, just getting on with life and settling into the village in Wishaw in Sutton Coldfield. And then over the years, I just really started to experience symptoms of headaches and vertigo and dizzy spells. And we ran our business as well from an outbuilding on the premises where the barn was. And lots of our staff as well were experiencing headaches and fertility problems, and you know, we were all visiting the doctor and the hospital. And even my son and my daughter, my son was suffering with horrendous nosebleeds, and they were going to cauterize his nose because they thought it was, you know, we didn't associate it with the mast at the time. We didn't know anything about. And then my daughter was having, you know, terrible night terrors and hallucinations. And it wasn't until I was then suffering with skin rashes, really horrific skin rashes, that felt like it was itching and burning. And then I found a lump in my breast, and I just thought at the time, you know, it was unlucky, and there's no history of it in my family of breast cancer, and I'm from a large family. And I was shocked at the time when I got the diagnosis, and just thought it was bad luck and I had to get on with it. And it was then I started bumping into neighbours in the hospital who were also other young women who'd been diagnosed with breast cancer at the same time, all over 6 months. There was 5 of us at the time all diagnosed with breast cancer in just 18 houses surrounding this mast. And so as then we started to question things, and we began to suspect there must be an environmental cause to it. And then it was T-Mobile who sent an application to increase the antennae on the tower. And it was then that our we started to get a little bit suspicious and started to ask questions. And there was no information available at the time, because 18 years ago. So we set up a little campaign group and started with a local survey of the houses, just to see how people were, you know, and how, if other people were suffering apart from the ladies I bumped into with the breast cancer. And we were absolutely horrified to discover we'd unearthed a horrendous can of worms. There was other people with cancer. There was young women who were struggling to conceive with pre-cancer cervical cells. And then there was all these other symptoms similar to what myself and my family have been suffering with the sleep problems, headaches, vertigo, and what the staff in our office were suffering with. that we started to realise something very serious was going on. And at that point, we'd been living next to that cell tower for over 7 years, and when the cancers all started to show. And so we set up a local campaign group, and we called it SCRAM, which stood for Seriously Concerned Residents Against Masks. And we started to we got on the telephone, phoning professors in universities, and one of the first people we engaged with was Alistair Phillips at PowerWatch, and Roger Coghill, and Professor Gerard Hyland, who was he'd had a research paper published in the Lancet at the time. And then so we started to gather our information, and the first thing we did was pull a public event together, and we brought both sides of the debate together in the UK at a local event which was packed. And after that event, when we heard from both sides of the debate, from the Health Protection Agency, from the government, from the scientists in the UK that were warning there was problems, well, that was when we really realised, along with our symptoms, that we had a serious problem going on and we needed to do something about it. So we started to work with a local physicist, and we decided to check other areas where there were foam masks. And we just unearthed more cancer clusters around other foam masks. And the scientist we worked with at the time, sadly he died last year, Dr. John Walker, he took a spectrum analyzer into these other areas in the UK, and we discovered more cancer clusters surrounding foam masks. So, and then we brought in all the local authorities from the environmental officers and from health officials and from our local government, and they were beginning to get concerned as well, and agreed that we should be allowed to go and have our immunity checked. And quite a number of us in the building, all of us had low white blood cell counts. The group of us who went ahead with that, and myself, including my children as well. And it was awful, shock, really, real shock to us all. And we were lucky in the West Midlands. We had fantastic support from the media, from the local media, from TV, from radio, and that really galvanised our campaign. And we started to then engage with lawyers, and we brought lawyers on board, and they reviewed all the research that we'd gathered to that date. This was over a number of years. And their advice to us at the time, and this was around 2003, was that we should actually serve notice against Crown Castle, who were the landowners, and T-Mobile, and alert them to all the research that was available. We've had a number of meetings with Crown Castle and T-Mobile, pleading with them to take the mast away, to move it to a location where there wasn't, any other houses, and they led us on a bit of a wild goose chase, looking at other locations, but all the other locations were near other people's homes, and there was no way we could move it from our backyard into somebody else's backyard. And so we took the legal advice, and we served notice against Crown Castle and T-Mobile, and we were told that this was a significant step to take, and that we listed everybody's names on who'd become ill, and we listed the research to that date, and said we would be holding them to account, that they will be held responsible one day. And what we didn't know was that, and years later that's come to light, that the time when they were denying that there was any problem and saying that they were working within the ICNIRP guidelines and it was safe working within those levels, T-Mobile had their own report done by the Ecolog Institute in Germany, where they reviewed over 220 research publications. And they were actually told in the year 2000 that the research that they'd reviewed had shown cancer-initiating effects, and could accelerate the effects, all the problems we were reporting. And they kept that research hidden, while in the meantime telling us there was no problem and they were working within safety guidelines. And that research didn't come to light until years later, and it was translated by a group called Heasy, and they translated this, and all the time T-Mobile had been sitting on this bombshell, which was warning them that the radiation limit should be dropped, by a massive amount, and that the research was there available to them. So in 2003, not long after we'd served notice, the mask actually ended up coming down, and that remains a mystery to this date, but that was forcefully removed. We don't know who removed it. It was on the 5th of November, which was bonfire night in the UK. And it was at the time when our legal action was really gearing up. So, but when the mast came down, the whole village came together, and not just the village, the whole community, the whole of Birmingham, were visiting us and offering to help with the campaign. And we had massive media support globally on Sky News and on the national news and within the national papers. And that's when our campaign went national. It was a big decision to decide whether we should alert everybody throughout the world to what we were going through at that time, because we knew that when we did, that our houses would be completely devalued. So that's another issue, and we felt we had a duty to everybody, really. None of us felt we could move and pass the house on to someone else. We felt we had a duty to let everybody know that we had this cancer cluster. And at the time, we thought the government would do something about it. As soon as they realise how serious this is, they'll obviously bring in regulation. And 18 years on, I'm still here trying to get that brought about. I'm absolutely shocked of what I've discovered on that journey. But at least we're sure where I was, diagnosed with the breast cancer is a safer place now. That mast has never ever gone back up, thankfully, due to the massive campaign and the determination of everybody in that village and people throughout Birmingham who rallied around us to make sure that mast never went back up. And we did get support from our local MP, Andrew Mitchell, who really helped to support us in the UK Parliament. And he held meetings with Crown Castle and T-Mobile until eventually they agreed to move the mast. And they did actually, we believe it went along a motorway, which was, away from everybody's houses. And, and we were able to just carry on with our lives then. And once the mast had gone, people started to recover. There was a baby boom in the village. There was finally able to sleep. My son's nosebleed stopped.
Wow.
And just we even started noticing the wildlife beginning to return to the countryside area where we were. And we had a horse as well, because there was a stables across the road from where I lived, and there was a horse that was an Olympic standard horse that had been suffering with blood problems that the vet couldn't get any control over. And as soon as the mast was gone, the horse recovered. And so, that was once that campaign was over, which was a tremendous campaign, and we received an award from Birmingham as well for creating awareness in the community. That was from the council. And most people went back to their lives and got on with their lives, and I'm still here. I was invited by the Mike Bell, who's a lawyer at the time, who'd been following our campaign, and he got in touch and asked if I would get involved and set up the Radiation Research Trust. So that's when, in 2003, we set the Radiation Research Trust, and that's just gone from strength to strength over the years.
Wow. That is an incredible story.
Yeah, it's been a long, hard campaign. And then with the Radiation Research Trust, we took it to the next level then. With my colleague Mike Bell, who's since retired now, we just started to travel. We went to Benevento, and Libby Kelly was running an event at the time in Benevento, where she brought a lot of the scientists together, and I'd been to an event shortly before then in 2004. It was a Children with Leukemia event in London. And I went as a member of the audience. And I remember at the time when Professor Yuri Grigorev was being brought on to present, and all the whispers in the audience of, you know, this great man who was coming to present to everybody. And I never imagined that I'd get to meet these people personally and even begin to call them friends. And the same with Henry Lai, you know, he was presenting as well at the same event. And then a year or so later, there I was in Benevento, and Henry Lai and Yuri Grigorev were walking in front of me. And to me, these people are rock stars. Yeah, these are the people that really are out there trying to alert the world to the science that exists and the science that's published. And it was then that I, you know, was able to meet them and to try and engage with them all and invite them to become our advisors at the Radiation Research Trust. And it went, you know, on another step further then. And a few years from then, Mike Repacholi was presenting at an event in London. And I decided to go and attend the event, both myself and Mike Bell. And it was an industry event. And we'd already pre-organized to try and meet with Mike Repacholi afterwards in a private meeting to try and find out why he'd taken the approach he had.
Eileen, I want to interrupt you for a second. Could you tell people who are new to this issue who Mike Repacholi is, and also who Dr. Lai is, while we're just introducing these people, because it's very important. So
yes,
some people are new to this issue.
Yeah, so you forget. I mean, Professor Henry Lai, he's one of the first who discovered, you know, there is the connection with cancer and the DNA damage. And he from Washington University. And Mike Repacholi is the ex-leader of the EMF project for World Health. And he also set up the ICNIR group as well at the same time. Mike Repacholi actually was also one of the first researchers that discovered there was a connection with cancer in the research he did with mice. So, you know, I was really wanting to question Mike Repacholi about how was he able to set up this group known as ICNIR with the guidelines that only protect your body from heat effects and for short-term exposure. These guidelines that we're all told are, you know, they're working in these safety guidelines, and they're not. I wanted to question him, and I had his own research paper in my hands at that event to just ask him about it. And I was absolutely shocked attending the event, this industry event, that Mike Repacholi at that, he was actually working for industry. And it was, during his presentation, it was quite confusing because it seemed like he was still at World Health from his presentation. And at the end of his presentation, it's even more confusing that he was saying there was no problem for children to use mobile phones, no problem for pregnant ladies to use mobile phones. And it was at that point I was able to question him and hold his paper up in the air for all the industry to see that he'd actually done some research himself that proved the connection with mice and cancer. And I couldn't understand why he was presenting, making it, which appeared he was still representing World Health, when he was, I actually congratulated him publicly for his new job working with industry, and said it was obviously quite confusing for the audience who must have been thinking that he was still working with World Health.
So just for clarification too, there are two entities of the World Health Organization. There's the EMF project, which was started by Repacholi, and then there is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is a group of independent scientists that come together and determine is there enough evidence to say that, you know, anything that an agent like cell phone radiation or asbestos or lead or et cetera causes cancer or causes harm. Those are two
Yeah.
separate entities. And Mike Repiccioli started the EMF project, and he also started ICNIRP, which is an invite-only club. And as we understand it, there was money from industry funneled through a hospital to help fund the WHO EMF project. And that confusion that you're raising is what still today, everyone's confused. They think that they're being told that things are safe when really they're half-truths or just little twists that are confusing. So you did this in a public meeting.
Yes.
Is it on camera?
Sorry, it wasn't on camera, but it was in a public meeting. It was an industry event, and you know, and we'd already pre-arranged to have this meeting. I don't think he was too pleased with me at the time for raising all these questions publicly in front of the industry. And I did have a queue of industry during the intervals wanting to ask questions and were quite concerned because that was the first they'd heard. But it was quite fortunate on that day. There was a double page spread in the newspaper of another cancer cluster that was around a bone mass. So I was able to hold that up in the event as well and question, you know, here's another cancer cluster. So that was my first meeting with Mike Repiccioli, but we'd also arranged this, myself and Mike Bell, to meet with Mike Repiccioli privately. And afterwards, I met with him privately. And during that meeting, he offered to work with me and to what did I want to achieve from this. And I thought back to when I first got involved with the campaign and locally in the UK, when we brought both sides of the debate together in the UK. And after we did that, we left the audience with no doubt we had a problem on our hands, and it shifted it a level. So I thought, well, this was a great opportunity to bring both sides of the debate together at a national, international level. And so I asked Mike Repiccioli if he would work with me to bring all his side of the debate together, and I would bring all our side of the debate together, which the Radiation Research Trust funded. And it took a year to actually bring both sides of the debate together, which we held an event for over 2 days at the Royal Society in London, and I'd arranged dinner at Westminster. We had MPs from every political party as well at that point, who were trustees and working with our charity. And it was such a challenging event to organise. I met so many barriers where it nearly didn't happen on a number of occasions. But we managed to pull it off. And I did try to get to a stage where I could write up areas of agreement, where both of the sides could try and arrange to areas where they could agree on. But I think that was a step too far for Mike Repiccioli's side of the debate. And so we ended up with bringing them all together, which was an achievement in itself. And from that, we ended up with news that was broadcast internationally. You know, I've got a file full of news reports that went worldwide. And at the end of that, you know, we were left with no doubt we've got a problem on our hands. And I thought that would be the breaking point for it, but it wasn't. You know, we're really up against massive industry funding here, and then the political interest in that as well. But it did take me on to another step where at that conference I was approached by Sissel Halamoy, who's a rocket scientist from Norway, and Sissel attended the event in London, and she approached me and asked if I would help to bring all the scientists, all the independent scientists from our side of the debate, if I would bring them together at an event in Norway. And which is what we achieved the following year. And it was our idea at that point to bring them all together, and some of the leading activists from around the world. And we were to attend an event in Norway for a week, and this is when I first met Deborah Davis. And the aim of that event was to get all the scientists to actually look at the research that had been published on showing the biological effects, and to actually publish a paper showing what they believed. There wasn't any other guidelines to follow apart from the ICNIRP guidelines, which only protect your body from cooking, you know, and they're only meant for a short period only. And so we thought, well, if we've got these biologically based guidelines, at least we've got then something for them to follow. And that paper's since been published, you know, so that's historically there. Really, it was another year's worth of work, pulling people together, and then the scientists themselves, in their own time, at their own cost, you know, spent about another year or so discussing all the science between them before that paper was published. And at that time, it was at that event in Norway that we formed the International EMF Alliance, which it's still, you know, it's going today. We didn't want to be a group that was representing the whole world. We wanted to be a group that just offered a platform for all the groups throughout the world to register with, to show a force, and to be able to share information between each other. And you know, that's quite a powerhouse, really. If you know, and it should be used a bit more, because it has come in really useful on one occasion, and that was another challenging event, which some years ago, I think it was 2012, there was there'd been a 2-year investigation in Europe by the European agents, one of the Europe, and they were looking into electrosensitivity. And we'd spent about 2 years speaking with scientists, speaking with people who were suffering with electrosensitivity. They produced an amazing report, which was then to go to the European Parliament and the European Commission, calling for electrosensitivity to be recognised and for people who were suffering to be protected. And there was lots of measures in this report put in place. And just the day before it was due to go for the final vote, the one of the British members of this agency had got wind of it, and he called an alternative, called for a debate. And he pulled this urgent debate in place. We discovered at the time he was actually working for industry, but hadn't disclosed his conflict of interests. And he misrepresented the research to all the colleagues, which we were able to watch live on via the internet. It was so frustrating to see, you know, that all these members were led to believe that after a 2-year investigation that had gone through stages of where it was about to be passed and then moved on to the European Parliament, which would have put pressure on Parliament to help bring in legislation. And it was just destroyed within this one meeting, and we were devastated. So the International EMF Alliance came in very useful at that point, because I began to work with all the European groups and got to the point where a lot of the history from the campaign comes back, and that first letter of notice that we served in Wishaw, that can be done by anyone. It doesn't have to be a lawyer. And we discovered that at the time. So I returned back to that and decided I would serve notice against this Richard Adams. And I don't think he was too pleased about it at the time. And so we listed, you know, all the reasons why we were serving notice against him. We put appeals with to him, you know, to not go down this route of trying to convince the members of the European agency that, you know, there wasn't a problem. He ignored all our appeals, went ahead, didn't disclose his conflicts of interest, and so we served notice on him. And I got all the groups throughout the whole of the International EMF Alliance to add the names of all their organisations to that letter, and you know, that gave power to us.
That speaks to the importance of getting it on the record.
Definitely.
When there is an exposure, that, you know, making sure that all the decision makers have been informed of the research that exists on biological effects, so that later, when they don't act, you can say, we told you, it was on the record. And I know people are doing that around the world. We're doing it related to the FCC here in the United States, and people are doing it in individual local and governments, to governments all around the world
Yeah,
internationally.
it's
I
great
want
to see it happen now.
what?
Yeah, it is great. I think it's important that these people will be held to account one day. And that campaign against Richard Adams, we then reported what had happened to the European Ombudsman, and then that resulted in another 2-year investigation, which the Ombudsman agreed with us in the end that he hadn't disclosed his conflicts of interest. And the rules are being changed now that all members from now on have to, show transparency. And it was a shame, though, that he'd influenced this vote to go the other way.
Right.
It's only by a tiny minority that he'd influenced the vote the other way. So, if the members had realised that he was actually representing industry, it was a smart meter industry. Well, then,
this conflict of interest is endemic to all of our situations at every level of government, at the city, the county, the state, and the government, the country government, and internationally.
Absolutely, and I think the only way forward with this now is legal, and this has got to be, we've got to be held to account, and it's clear for everybody to see now, and from the latest Italian case that was won as well.
Yes.
ICNA, I believe it was Michael Piccioli and Anders Alblom that were representing industry again, and their evidence wasn't accepted by the judge because of the conflicts of interest, and thankfully the case was won, and I hope we're going to see a lot more of those cases won. And with those sort of comments and their ICNA evidence that wasn't accepted, well, I'm hoping more courts around the world take that same approach and begin to realise that you can't be relying on a private members group that was set up in Germany and known as ICNA, that the judges, as in that case, are saying are not reliable and presenting the on representing industry. So we need the independent scientists, such as what we've been working with, to be able to now be listened to by the governments and to be taken seriously, because it's you can see right in front of us. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was told only 1 in 10 people get cancer, and now 18 years later we're being told 1 in 2 people will get cancer. So it can't carry on like this.
Right. I think I want to point out some things you were talking about in terms of the court cases. In Italy, there are several court cases that have been won on brain tumors associated with cell phone radiation. And in those cases, the judge said, I will only look at independent science, not the industry-funded science, because industry is funding so much of the science, and they probably put far more into their communications, frankly, but they also have a lot involved in the science. And if you're an independent researcher, it is very hard to get funds. There is defunding that has happened over decades. And now we're in a situation where hardly any governments are funding research on the safety of cell phone and cell tower radiation. But I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to, one, whoever's listening, please put your questions in the chat, because I would like to entertain your questions, or in the Q&A. And I wanted to share some slides of ways that you have raised awareness in the UK with Radiation Research Trust, and then bring us right up to 5G and what you're doing now. So I'm going to share my screen with you, with everyone, to show first her website, and Oops. So radiationresearch.org
Yes.
is the Radiation Research Trust website. This is a poster that was put out by Radiation Research Trust, Electromagnetic Man, and Electrical Sensitivity UK? Electro Sensitivity UK. And as I understand it, this second one, Worth the Risk, It's Your Call, that has, I put a close-up of the image on the phone. These were put in, I think, bus depots and as an awareness measure. It has, like, instead of apps, damaged immune system, headaches, memory loss, sleep disorders, damaged sperm count, brain tumor. And I think I'm correct that this was attacked by industry and needed to be removed.
It was we received a complaint from the Advertising Standards Agency, and they'd obviously received complaints from industry, and they asked us to remove them, and they're actually in service stations along the motorway, and anyway, we've reached virtually the end of the campaign with the posters anyway, but we did set up a challenge, you know, and ask them why they had to be removed. You can't see why there's any controversial message within it. It's actually stating the truth and the research that's there, and for just no reason at all. You know, the Advertising Standards Agency have said that there is no evidence of harm and that we have to remove them, despite the fact that everything we've presented is peer-reviewed, published research, and is showing evidence of harm. So this is what we're up against, you know.
And here is, and then that's happened again, which I have a slide of what's happened now with 5G, but I wanted to share this too. This is a poster that was put, you can see, in urinals. Your future is in your hands. Medical experts are warning men not to keep their mobile phones in their pockets, as it's going to have a direct effect on their fertility. Do you want to talk about this campaign very briefly?
Yeah, the same happened with this campaign as well. This was in, I think it was 2011, and we were ordered to remove those posters. And the same, you know, we asked why, and then they asked us they said there was no evidence. So we actually worked with Alistair Phillips from PowerWatch as well at that time and presented the research and the evidence. And even then, we were still told that that they still felt there was no evidence of harm, and so they said we weren't allowed to do it again, to, you know, have the posters there again, and they were thought to be removed. So,
wow.
You know, even when we've got the evidence, we've got the research, we're stating the facts that have already been stated by officials, I don't know how they can ask to have this sort of information removed. And it seems to be getting worse at the moment with the censorship that's going on and the freedom of speech. It seems to have gone to another level now with 5G. Our freedom of speech now is really being stamped upon even more, and the censorship is just unbelievable.
Yes. Could you talk about this poster I have up? This is the most recent.
Well, this is the most recent one that was run last year. And it's mainly ES UK, Electrosensitivity UK, and we've worked in hand with them with our logo and Radiation Research Trust. And it's asking a question: how safe is 5G? You know, it's a question, and then it's just asking, you know, whether it's pointing to the facts that, you know, what was the problem in raising a question? And 5G hasn't been proved to be safe yet. And yet, even just by raising this question, we've been asked to remove the posters again by the Advertising Standards Agency. And the same, there's no evidence of harm, but they've got no proof of safety. So if they've got no proof of safety, how can they be allowed to roll this stuff out? That's the question we should be asking.
Yes. And,
Yeah,
and We have all of this information on our website, ehtrust.org, as well as the Electrosensitivity UK and EM Radiation Research Trust, where there was a back and forth between the ad agency and the presentation of the studies that back up and the documentation of what is being stated on these posters, and yet they still stated that you had to take these down.
Yes, and it's outrageous when you think about it, you know, because they're saying there's no evidence of harm, but where's their proof of safety? And that's what we need to keep asking them. Show us that this is safe before you expose the public to untested and unregulated technology. And that's another really important fact, because we've just had the ongoing PhoneGate scandal that's going on now. That's shown that a lot of these phones have been exceeding the guidelines, you know, that they're supposed to be not working within the SAR level. And now they've exposed the fact that, you know, they've exceeded those levels. So who knows what's going on in our environment? You know, what are we being exposed to? Because nobody's checking. There's no agency out there to check what these levels are. We know that the ICNIRP guidelines are not safe as it is, and we know that from our own health experience and what we've seen in the research. But could they be exceeding them guidelines as well? There's no one there checking. So I just find it really disappointing that our politicians are not doing more about this, because they're there to represent us, you know, and the fear that's coming about now for people, quite rightly as well, apart from the health effects, is now the way it's stepping up into Big Brother and the surveillance of everything. And that's going to take away our freedom and our human rights, and you can see it happening, and that's quite frightening as well. I just think these politicians are there to represent us. They're not there to control us. And they need to be there to protect our health, not the industry. You know, and we're asking for just simple measures like with this 5G. We're asking for the fibre optic system to be put in. You know, not going down this road of just putting it everywhere and anywhere without any consultation, without any consent. And then the politicians wonder why they lose trust, why they no longer have our respect. You know, but what can they expect if they're not listening to us, or if they're riding roughshod over us and listening to industry and listening to industry science, funded science? You know, it needs to change. It's quickly.
What do you see as the way, what has been inspiring and help keeps you working on this, and what you would see as wins on this issue around the world?
Well, wins on this issue around the world is I really do believe we're winning. We're really gathering pace. And I think this is where the censorship's coming on, because we've got the truth on our side, we've got the science on our side, we've got the information that we can put out there, and we're putting it out there globally. And this is why they're having to censor it, because they're trying to keep a lid on it and not allow the public to hear it. But we've got the wins on our side now. Is we're connected globally. It's a global movement now. It's not just our little village. We're all joined up in one massive force, and we're seeing wins happen now in the courts, which was just tremendous. The Italian court case. You know, we're seeing now other court cases being filed by the likes of the Environmental Health Trust and the Kennedy Group, and you know, the more of these cases that are won, the more power to us. This is the way it's going to go, through the class actions, through the courts, and we've got to keep hammering home to all our politicians that we don't consent. We've actually produced a form on the Radiation Research Trust that you can download. It's a I do not consent form, And we're encouraging everybody to send these forms to the landowners of the masts, to the politicians, and to the industry, letting them know that we're not consenting. And the more people that fill these forms in, that write the letters to their politicians and let them know that it's not acceptable, the better. And the message is getting out. And the 5G campaign, is devastating as it is for us, because we know the dangers associated with 2G right up to 4G and Wi-Fi and deaf phones. The research is there, and now they're bringing in this untested, unregulated 5G. But by bringing that in, they've just exploded the campaign globally, because it's now going to go on everybody's street, and that's where there's been a lot of public interest. Some of it's been misguided, but it's still drawing people to the campaign, as I'm sure many of us have come into this campaign saying, could it be or couldn't it be? But once you start reading that research, there's no denying. Once you start speaking to people who've suffered, you can't deny it. And God forbid you end up in a position that I was in, and many other people that I know who've become ill, seriously ill from it, and I've seen people lose their lives from it. Well, then, it's too late then for some people, and that's what drives me.
Yes.
Seeing what happened in our village, seeing what's happened to other people, watching people who've gone through those last days of their life with cancer, with motor neuron disease. It's horrific, absolutely horrific. And it makes me angry to think that this is happening, and especially to our children. No guidelines have been put in place at all for our children, and they're not being warned, but the warnings were there. Under 16s were advised that they shouldn't really use the phones unless it's an emergency. But the parents aren't hearing this, the schools aren't hearing this. And yesterday I was absolutely outraged that a newspaper that supplies all the schools yesterday supplied over 2.2 million children in the UK with a news report telling them that 5G is completely safe. Outrageous. And the most vulnerable group of society, our children, they're telling them 5G is safe because of the ICNIRP guidelines and World Health tell them so. And there's no way they can say that. And so that's my latest letter that I'm working on now, which is to, report them to the press agency, and compiling some of the research on children. And this is wrong. We should be at least alerting the parents, the children, the schools, that there's another way forward, that the children shouldn't be using Wi-Fi in schools. It should be hardwired. And there's other things we can do you can still use the technology, but use it in a safer way, use it on a fixed wire, use your phone on a fixed landline, restrict your children's use of the phones, not just for the radiation dangers with it, but also for, what content are they viewing? What are they looking at? What games are they playing on it? There's no restrictions at all.
Yeah, the door has, when I started on this about a decade ago, you're about 2 decades in, and it was just really the phone, maybe some Wi-Fi, and now the whole thing has exploded to where the amount of devices we're exposed to, there's no other environmental exposure that has increased so rapidly into every age group in people all over the world. I have a couple questions, both that were written in that I have here and that are being asked, and I just wanted to ask you about it. So one was have you heard of the depletion of oxygen from millimeter 5G waves? And as well, and what is coming up for all of us, certainly in the United States with the Telecom Act, is that we can only oppose a cell tower because of aesthetic issues, how it looks, and we're not permitted to oppose for health concerns, states someone who's written in. Cell phone radiation is a documented carcinogen based on research which has been published by several scientists. However, I know that we in the United States, we can raise the issue, but the Telecom Act is being interpreted by our elected officials and in some courts where we believe it has been an overreach of the statute to mean that if we were to, if decisions were made to site a tower that are based solely on the health implications, the long-term health implications, that then the companies could sue the locality, the city. And that's because the Telecom Act in 1996 that was passed in the United States, I don't know if you have something similar in the UK, stated that environmental concerns cannot be used as long as the limits are met in the siting of a tower. However, the limits that we have are only based on short-term heating. They didn't look at children. They didn't look at pregnant women. They didn't look at long-term exposure, which is what we're all exposed to. So it's unbelievable that that this is still in place, and that our and all the work that we're doing to raise awareness with elected officials is just going a little bit too slow. But I will say this in the United States, I'm not sure if you know that several states have passed laws creating commissions or asking the health authorities to do reports. In New Hampshire, there is an independent commission, a commission that meets, reviews the science, interviews experts. And in Oregon, they passed a bill to have only the independent peer-reviewed science on wireless, with especially looking at Wi-Fi in schools. So change is happening, but it's taking every one of us at every, just to lift, many hands make light work on this.
Absolutely. I mean, you've also got in the US the tremendous work of Susan Foster with the firefighters. And if the firefighters are saying that there's a problem and there needs to be a distance from where the fire stations are, well, that's a problem for everyone, and so there is some great work going on in the USA and globally, of bringing it together. We've got the same rules here, but they were challenged once in court. It was a case brought forward by Yasmin Skelt. If you look the case up, it was a court case against an orange mast, and goes back to over a decade ago. But she challenged the planning application because we're not allowed either to object against a mast on health grounds. But this was actually challenged by Yasmin Skelt, and she took the office of the Deputy Prime Minister to court on it, and they stepped back from it and allowed the case to the mast application to be squashed, because the judge actually did say, I can't remember it word for word, but the judge actually agreed that your health concerns should be part of the planning consideration. And so it was never then taken to the next step. The office of the Deputy Prime Minister stepped back from it, I think, to stop it from becoming part of a fully stamped court case, and dropped the case, so the mast didn't go ahead. And there was a lot of news reports calling it orange squashed, because the mast application was squashed then. So I think it's very, I think it could be very easily challenged, the fact that they're not allowed to consider, we're not allowed to consider health. And that's one of the cases really that should be taken forward now, because I don't think they're on very dodgy ground with, as you said, if these guidelines don't protect children, they don't protect pregnant ladies, the short term, they're only to stop you from heating effects. So, and these guidelines, even the latest ones, are not considered, they haven't even looked at the NTP studies, they haven't brought that into the latest review. And so they can't be relied upon, and the governments are really to rely on ICNIR, the private members group. It's only a matter of time before that is actually destroyed in the courts, and it's already started happening with the case in Italy last year. So where are they going to go from here? you know. And then the other question about the oxygen, I've heard about this, and it's part of the campaign with the 5G. I really don't know the answer to that one, to be honest, whether it is an effect or whether it isn't, you know, and I'm not sure of the research to do with the zapping of oxygen at 60 hertz. So,
could I ask you a question that someone posted in the Q&A? What kind of test did you do on was it your white blood cells when you were experiencing those symptoms in cancer? Can you talk a little bit about that, and have the levels changed since you have been able to get away from the cell antennas?
yeah, well, before I started the chemo, I had my full blood count taken, including the neutrophils and white blood cell count. And before I even started, my white blood cells were low. So we knew it was going to be difficult to get through the chemo because I was low at the start. And so each time before you have a chemotherapy treatment, you have your blood tested again. And they had to give me these neutropin injections to force the white blood cells out of my bone marrow to get me through the treatment. But there was, so I was regularly getting my blood tested. And on 3 occasions during that 6 months of chemotherapy treatment, I actually left where I was sure to go. And so on 2 occasions, it was to visit my family up in Merseyside. And I'd since discovered, they didn't have a mask, they didn't have any technology, the house was completely clear. And on the 2 occasions when I'd gone to visit family, and that was quite sort of stressful events, it wasn't relaxing, it was, you know, busy, stressful events that I'd gone to attend. And on those 2 occasions that I'd been away from the mask, only after a weekend, my blood had recovered enough not to have the white blood cells forced out of my bone marrow. And then there was another occasion I left during that 6 months treatment, and I went on a little break to Spain for 5 days. And after 5 days, I'd had a massive increase in my blood cells without needing any intervention again from, you know, from the neutropin injections. And I've still got them records. I've got that recorded, you know, and the dates had gone away.
So that was, sorry, that was a regular CBC, just a regular blood test, just the amount of, not anything more complicated than that.
But then after that, the director of public health, this was during my treatment, and then when the campaign took off, and the director of public health to the region where I was living at the time, when we started to raise it as a problem and a concern, and the cancer cluster was shown, he agreed that anyone who wanted to go and have blood tested at the local doctor's surgery could go and have the white blood cells tested. So a number of us went, including I took my 2 children as well. And this was, you know, about a year later, and we all had low white blood cells. So the way I then started to go about trying to protect ourselves as a family was I had all my windows replaced with Pilkington K glass, which cut the radiation coming down through all the glass down. I bought a radiation detector, and so it detected where it was coming in mostly. One of my neighbours was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and she didn't have a wheelchair delivered to her home because they said she was so ill. It turned out it wasn't fibromyalgia, it was electrosensitivity. And the room she was sleeping in, when we detected had the radiation detector in her bedroom, she was sleeping in a metal bed, and the radiation was really high in that room. She moved to just one of the rooms in the back of the house and got rid of the metal bed, and she was just like a miraculous recovery. You know, but she is quite sensitive. She's really has to keep herself away from all the exposures now. But she didn't realise at the time she was being misdiagnosed. So how many people out there in society today are suffering with symptoms and they're not realising what's causing it? You know, they're not being told that the best way they can try and protect their health, apart from, you know, more healthily and take exercise, is to reduce all their electromagnetic exposures. And that the government owe it to the public really to start alerting them now, to let them know the simple measures they can take to protect themselves, to protect their families, but still use the technology today. You know, and they really need to be stepping up now and doing that now.
So how when you first heard about this, how did you feel?
About
when you first realized that you know, you were sick and that there was something even called, you know, cell phone radiation, which I don't even know if you were aware of at the time, that it even was something to even think about.
Well, I remember just feeling really angry, you know, that this had been allowed to happen, and then when I was discovering more cancer clusters, that, you know, it was not just us, it was all over the country, and then finding out it's global, you know, and you just think in this day and age, after all the things we've learned, you know, with asbestos, with smoking, with all these other things that have happened in the past, and we always say, let's learn from history and never allow it to happen again. And it's happening all over again. And I actually think that this is probably one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue in the world to deal with today. And Robert Becker, I remember his quote that he gave, saying that he considered he twice nominated for the Nobel Prize. And, you know, one of the most powerful statements I'd ever read, and I believe every word he said, was that he believes this issue to be far greater on a global scale than global warming and any chemical in the environment. And I think he's right, you know, that we've been drawn into this really challenging campaign, and we've really got a duty. It shouldn't be our duty, it should be done by the government and the public health officials, but we really need to get the public to become aware urgently, you know, and because it's only us that can do something about it. You know, we're the first people that we could do something immediately. If the whole world decided that they didn't need to use the mobile phones only for an emergency only, you know, and go back to using the landlines and fixed wired computers and still use technology as much if they want. But, you know, they instantly they could take the power back in their hands and start to demand change. So it's up to us really. If we want to really do something about it, you have to start in your own home, start with your own life, and start protecting your own family and yourself first, and then alert everybody around you. Because 18 years on, we're still waiting for the government, we're still waiting for the industry, we're still waiting for the public health officials to do the right thing, and they're not listening. You know, they're going full steam ahead with this 5G, and it'll be 6G, and, you know, the campaign will get bigger and bigger, but we can do something now, and we just need to carry on like we are, educating people. And, you know, the Environmental Health Trust are doing a fantastic job on that. Congratulations, really, you know, some brilliant work coming out from yourselves, and just keep on telling everybody to make a change.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. So thank you for all your work. And we will be posting this online and have a link to your website at Radiation Research. And I hope that everyone listening is, you know, continuing this incredible work. So it's so important.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. And big thanks to Deborah as well. You know, you're all doing a tremendous job. And great that you're there getting this message out, because from 18 years ago we had nothing, and there's that much stuff out there now. You know, they can't keep the censorship on this for much longer, because it's too late. People are becoming aware, people are becoming ill, and people are beginning to realize what the cause is of their illness, and so time to take action. Start looking after yourself, your family, and then alert the rest of the world.
Yes. Getting informed, getting educated, educate your community, making those changes at home, and then every level of government. If everyone does a piece of this, we will get there.
Everyone just does a petition, send a letter to their politician, to the senator. Just you think that you can't make a change, but you can. I remember sitting with that blank page, wondering where to start 18 years ago, and seeing the tremendous growth in this globally since then. So, just start with a letter to your local representative, your local councillors, your local government, write to the, your president. And if you don't want to put your own letter together, if you're right at the beginning of the campaign and you're not sure what to write, just download the information on our website, get the I do not consent form and fill that out and just send it off to your representatives. All the information's there now for people to use. Freely just get it out there, and then demand that these people who are supposed to be representing us, people that we voted in to look after us, do their job and do what they're there for, which is to protect us, not control us. Protect us and represent us properly. Not be representing the industry and what's right for them. Represent the public who voted them into these positions. So I think people forget that. They work for us, these politicians. They're taking our taxes, and that's their job to look after us. So people people shouldn't be afraid of approaching them. We should be demanding that these people get out and do their job properly, and start raising these questions of the public officials. And I think that's our next campaign. We really need to get everybody to question the conflicts of interest with ICNIR, with World Health, the World Health EMF project, and ICNIR, and we should be demanding that every one of our politicians who represent us raise these questions on our behalf and send these letters into World Health asking them, where are these conflicts of interest? Why aren't we having a more independent group of scientists involved with setting these guidelines? And so we should be demanding the best of our politicians, and they need to be doing the job properly now.
Yes, and I know that I have one more question before we end, but I wanted to mention that, so on our website at ehtrust.org, we've been keeping track of what different countries are doing, and found it very interesting that in the UK, your government had far more information about this a decade ago, and it has slowly been rewritten. I will say hidden, because it's really hard to find. At this point, there's just like one sentence left that says protect children, children and cell phones, decrease exposure. But previous to that, there was actually information on pregnant women, and far more clear to people who don't, who just are not physicists, that, hey, it makes sense to reduce exposure because this hasn't been around in the population so long that we have the 30 years that we need to really see the statistics, which are dead bodies. Statistics are dead bodies, are sick people. But I know in the UK, I just was shocked at how every few years things disappeared to where you have this one little document that I bet nobody's even aware of.
No, I mean, it's shocking, because we had a decent man in charge when I first got involved, and that was Sir William Stewart. And they had the Stewart report, which was, full of recommendations at the time, and precautionary approach. And I actually got to meet Sir William Stewart. He was in charge of the Health Protection Agency.
Really?
Yes, and he'd been Tony Blair's main scientific advisor all through his term, and Margaret Thatcher's main scientific advisor through her term. So for about 20 years, you know, he'd been in a real strong position. And I met him face to face, and he agreed, you know, he listened to what had happened. He agreed that you've got to listen to people, you've got to look at, even if the science isn't there, and that's what he said at the time. And he actually presented at the Radiation Research Trust conference, and his presentation is on our website from the 2008 conference. And it's
Oh, really?
some powerful information in there directly from Sir William Stewart. You know, and where he was even saying at that time, since then we've had a lot more peer-reviewed published information. But in 2008, he was saying we should be listening to people, you know, even if there isn't peer-reviewed research, we need to be listening to people, and if they're saying there's a problem, we should be listening to what they're saying and not dismissing it. And he invited me to be a member of the Health Protection Agency EMF discussion group. And I was on that. It was both sides of the debate again. We had a lot of closed door meetings for 2 years, and he was a really good man. He actually went on to one of our hard-hitting documentary programs called Panorama. I think we've got a copy of that on our website as well, and that was about Wi-Fi in schools. And he said at the time, you know, he raised concerns and urged caution. He said, who knows what's going to happen to the children in the future? And it was shortly after then that he ended up stepping down and retiring from the Health Protection Agency. And it's such a shame, because since he's left, that's where you've seen all the information disappearing and eroding, and you know, it's quietly just been put away into a box, and you can't even find it on the websites anymore. Luckily, I've got hard copies. But you can't find the Stewart report on there anymore. You know, it's not available, and just everything's getting watered down. It's getting watered down when things are getting worse, and there's more research and more information available to show there are effects. You know, and since then we've had the World Health classification saying this is possibly causing cancer in 2011. More research released since then. I think that if anyone's asked any questions of whether anything thrown into doubt, I think people just really need to remember that 29 scientists to 1 voted that this is possibly causing cancer in 2011. And now we've got more research since then. You know, that's been published, the NTP study and the Ramzini study.
You know,
so it should be getting stronger, not weaker.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention a few things you talked about. One was the BBC piece called Panorama, and we have that on our website as well. We have we just put up a new page on films about EMFs. It's sort of a short list because there's a lot more, but we have the movie Resonance, which I believe that you're in, as well as the BBC documentary, and as well as a documentary called A Radiant Day, which also featured Sir William Stewart as well as Repiccioli talking. I want to ask our last question before we end this, which is about 5G being rolled out during the COVID lockdown. And I want to say first that our scientists do not believe that 5G has caused COVID at all. And that is a myth that is being put out, and I believe used as a straw man argument by industry so that they can aim at that and then, you know, call all the scientists who are raising awareness about this, you know, that they're wrong about that. And this is happening in the United States too, where while we're all locked down, 5G and small cells are actually being built, even amidst the lockdown, even in places where there's cell service. And so a viewer wrote about this and wanted to ask about addressing that. And are you noticing that in the UK?
Yeah, the same's happening in the UK, and the industry. I agree with you. The scientists are not saying that there is a connection with coronavirus and this 5G. I don't know where that came from. You know, the science hasn't been done. on that. So, but you know, the industry are using, I've got a great PR machine out there now who are using this to try and then make it look like all of our researchers are part of a conspiracy, and it's not. You know, this, we're talking of decades peer-reviewed published research on radio frequency EMF. They can't get away from that. You know, that's there, and it's devastating. But we've got the same problem going on here, and there's been a lot of fires as well with these masts, and they're using that and blaming the public of arson attacks, and they can't even, these reports are still ongoing. They had the West Midlands, one of the West Midlands police officers who was at the scene was asked, was this an arson attack? And she said it could be down to electrical fires. So these reports, you know, why are the industry claiming there's arson attacks, and the government? Why are they out there? We've got adverts on our radio now saying that these, the industry who are now seeing to the masts and putting up the system are now classed as an emergency service to, you know, to be able to put up this service for us while we're working from home. But we don't need this 5G, and we haven't asked for it. We haven't consented, and we haven't been consulted. And you know, and at the same time, they're blaming people for these arson attacks. It may turn out that it was due to electrical fires, electrical faults.
I know that some cases have been confirmed as being caused by electrical faults in the news. Not all, and there certainly is videos of people actually, and I don't know if they're true or not, but actually, you know, lighting fire. But then there are also cases where they have confirmed it's an electrical fault, which is a whole other issue, right? Why we're putting these in our homes and neighborhoods and they catch fire.
Well, you've probably all seen that, you know, the massive fire we had in London a few years ago, the Grenfell fire, which was devastating. The big tower block that just burned down. And nothing to do with I'm not saying it's anything to do with a phone mast or anything. But what I'm saying is, if these phone cell towers have got electrical faults, and then they're putting them on the top of buildings, they're putting them right next to buildings. And I think there was a report in New Zealand that's just been released that one of the mass fires was an electrical fault. Well, what does that say to people who've got them, you know, on top of, put them on, that have been put on top of their buildings or next to their homes? You know, the argument should be turned around, and the safety aspect of it should be thrown back at industry. You know, how dare they be putting these things on our homes, next to our homes, that have got dangerous electrical faults? You know, so there might be a bit of both. There might be a bit of arson attack or electrical faults going on, but whatever's happening, you know, there's only seems to be one-sided reporting going on here by the media. They're just blaming the public. They're not highlighting the facts that of these electrical faults or the seriousness of what that actually means. You know, what will they have to do? They have to take them all down off the top of buildings? Because I wouldn't want one on top of my building. You know, apart from the health effects side of it, the dangers associated with electrical faults. And in the UK, part of the problem they've had is with the big, there's a lot of these buildings have been got this cladding on it, which is quite a fire hazard. We're trying to replace a lot of the buildings with these dangerous cladding on them.
Dangerous what? Say that again?
The cladding, it's like a fixture to the front of the buildings that's been shown to be more combustible. So in some of the fires, you know, they're having to take this frontages off the buildings and replace them, but it's a big job, you know. And so I'd be interested to see what the fire reports turn out to be with all these fires. So,
yes, and I want to be clear that we don't condone setting these to fire at all.
Absolutely not.
It's not going to serve us. But I will say that when Environmental Health Trust scientists have tried to contact the media, the BBC, the New York Times, the media reporting on that to say, look, We don't condone this. We do not believe that 5G is causing COVID, but we do know that electromagnetic fields and the small cell antennas emit a kind of radiation that published research has shown the following effects. So they've tried to make sure that that information was out there, but it's really not getting out in the media. The reporters are not publishing the rather nuanced reality. You know, they just want to go right for the fires and the conspiracy, and that is very unfortunate because there's, you know, thousands of studies.
They're letting the public down. They're not representing us. They're not a free press anymore. And who's controlling them? Who's telling them that they're not allowed to put, you know, to allow our freedom of speech, or to even show all the published research that is out there? You know, when I was first involved with this campaign, it was tremendous. We were given tremendous amount of media coverage. But now there seems to be a real big global clampdown on it. You know, it's quite worrying, really, that you would have never believed that our freedom of speech, and it's not just us thinking that there's a problem, but presenting research that's, you know, decades of research that have shown there is a really serious problem here that they need to be taken seriously. But we're not getting any airtime, and it's wrong. And I look, this moment in time that we're going through, historians will look back at it and they will be horrified, you know. So they will be horrified that this was allowed to happen.
Well, so on we go.
Yeah.
We will continue.
Another 10 years.
I hope that it comes sooner than that. There's such a groundswell of awareness. So thank you so much for joining us. And
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.